Hey everybody, Dr. G here. I'm a licensed clinical psychologist and body language expert, and today we're going to be analyzing the body language of Shanna Gardner-Fernandez. Shanna Gardner-Fernandez is the ex-wife of Microsoft executive Jared Bridegan. Jared Bridegan was murdered over a year ago. A tire being in the road prompted Jared Bridegan to stop his car. When he got out of the car, he was shot. His 2-year-old daughter remained in the car, and fortunately she was unharmed. Since the incident, 3 arrests have been made: his ex-wife Shanna Gardner-Fernandez, her husband Mario Fernandez, and a former tenant who claims to have been the shooter. A couple of quick things before we get started. One, everybody in this country is presumed innocent until proven guilty. The goal of this is not to prove her guilt or her innocence. The goal of this is to provide commentary about her body language based on publicly available information. This is not a psychological evaluation. I'm not doing anything formal. I'm just telling you my opinions based on what I'm seeing. I do not insist any of this is fact. It's just my observations. And before we get started, I do want to remind you to like and subscribe if you want to see more content just like this. All right, let's go. So what we're looking at today is an interview with a local news station from about a year ago. During this, they're going to ask her a lot of questions about what happened. And so we're going to get to see a little bit of her reaction. This is really the only interview she's given like this. So I'm not having much of a chance to develop what we call a baseline. So I don't know what her normal behaviors are, but I'm going to tell you what we see in terms of possible emotions that she may be experiencing.
Our first question: why have you stayed silent?
I was asked to not talk to the media or give a public statement, but with the level of speculation, I felt that now it was necessary to speak out.
Shanna Gardner.
All right, so a couple of things we're going to notice. This is very brief, but what we see is that there's not a lot of movement in her forehead. We see a lot of emotions in the forehead, so we oftentimes look at brows. When people are angry, the brows come together. When they're sad, they go up. There's various different positions the brows go in depending on how somebody feels. So we're not seeing much there. I don't know if she has Botox. I don't know if she just isn't feeling much. I don't know if maybe she doesn't show much in her forehead. But as you've noticed, it didn't really move at all during this first part. Another thing that I noticed is that she closed her eyes when she talked about speaking out. Oftentimes we do this when we think about things that we don't like, or when we have a mental image that we don't like. So why she closed her eyes at that point, I'm not sure, but that's not the only time she's going to close her eyes. So I wanted to explain what that means. We'll go back and watch that part again, and then we'll continue on.
I felt that now it was necessary to speak out.
Shanna Gardner revealed she was asked by Jared Bridegan's widow, Kirsten, not to speak publicly, but we wanted to know how the relationship could have gotten to that point.
I'm sure you would say that we've had happy moments.
So this is an odd way to phrase this. You'd say that we've had happy moments. Watch this again, and you're going to see her eyes close when she's talking about this.
But we wanted to know how the relationship could have gotten to that point.
I'm sure you would say that we've had happy moments.
I'm sure that you would say that we've had happy moments. That's not a ringing endorsement of having had any good times in a relationship. And she seems very hesitant to acknowledge any happy times that she had. So that's very interesting that she would say, you would say this. The phrasing of it is unusual. It's not to say that she didn't have happy moments, but the way that she's framing it makes it sound like that's not something she really wants to highlight. Let's listen to her say that again.
I wanted to know how the relationship could have gotten to that point.
I'm sure you would say that we've had happy moments.
And she almost said, I'm sure there were happy moments, but I'm sure you would say there were happy moments. It's very interesting and very specifically phrased.
We share the 2 most beautiful children in the world. Anytime divorce comes into any situation, it's messy. It just is. I will say that I think that we both love our kids.
Once again, the way that she phrases things is very odd. I will say that I think we both love our kids. So in other words, that suggests there are things that she won't say. So it seems like she really does not like saying positive things about her late ex-husband. Let's watch this again. And once again, I do want you to keep in mind, this does not imply guilt. It may just imply that they had a very rocky and tense relationship. But it's interesting how carefully she is phrasing all of these things.
I will say that I think that we both love our kids.
That's exactly what Jared and his twins did the night he was killed.
It was actually one of the things. I'm sorry. I remember my son tucking him in and him saying that it was a good date night.
So let's go back and watch that again. One thing you'll probably notice is that there was a lot of blinking. You'll also notice that there weren't any actual tears that had formed. And once again, people can feel upset and hold back tears. I'm not suggesting that because she's not crying, that means that somehow that she is guilty of what she's been accused of. But it is just an observation. It is interesting to consider all of those things. Another thing I want you to be keeping an eye out for is that her brow doesn't show sadness. There's a position that people's eyebrows typically take when they feel sadness, and we're not seeing her brows move at all. Once again, that could be Botox or something else, but her brow really moves very, very little.
Actually, one of the things,
So you see her blinking a lot. That oftentimes denotes stress. So as she's talking about this, that seems to be causing her stress.
A tire was rolled out into the street. Jared got out of his car to move it and was shot dead. His 2-year-old daughter sat in the car, strapped into her car seat alone for 3 minutes before someone came to help.
I was shocked. I fell to the floor because I was devastated for what I was going to have to tell my kids.
So let's go back and review this part. Now, she said she was shocked. Watch this.
I was shocked.
Okay, so typically when someone is shocked by something, typically if there's an experience that is very significant, very severe, the shock will show very briefly. They'll flash their eyebrows upward because when we get shocked, we open our mouths, we raise our eyebrows. That is a look of shock. Now, when somebody recalls that, they don't have to show that. Obviously, that's not universal, but we oftentimes do, especially when something is incredibly shocking, like somebody passing away or something that somebody didn't expect. So it's interesting that she doesn't have any visceral reaction to talking about the fact that she was shocked that it happened.
I fell to the floor because I was devastated for what I was going to have to tell my kids.
Now, that's also a very interesting comment. I fell to the floor because I was devastated, not because her 2-year-old was in the car when her father was murdered, and not because she had lost someone that she cared about, even if they'd had a tense relationship. She was devastated by the fact that she was going to have to tell her children that. Now, of course, that would be devastating, no question. But that being the only thing that she said in this part, I found a little unusual. And I do get that this is a news segment. It's possible the way they phrase questions, or that maybe they cut other parts out. Maybe this seems unusual just because that's what we're seeing. But I at least wanted to point out that there are things about that really stand out. Let's watch her say that one more time, and then we're going to keep going.
To help.
I was shocked. I fell to the floor because I was devastated for what I was going to have to tell my kids.
Jared died in that street, leaving behind 4 children and a heartbroken family.
They were, I think, in shock.
Now, this is interesting. Now she's talking about her children being in shock, and she does raise her eyebrows. Let's watch her say that again, and watch the eyebrows.
Behind 4 children and a heartbroken family.
They were, I think, in shock.
So as she's saying shock this time, she's raising her eyebrows because I'm sure her children were in shock. So once again, this is not to prove through a microscope that she did all these things or that she was involved in it. But it does show that it's interesting that when she was talking about herself and saying, I was in shock, she didn't show the raised eyebrows, but she's talking her children being in shock, and she is. I think that's interesting. Maybe she's just feeling more when she's talking about her children, but the reaction is different. We'll watch it one more time.
Broken family.
They were, I think, in shock.
Later, in a blog post, Shanna's mother said she was not invited to the funeral.
Now the interviewer is going to be asking her about whether or not she was involved with the murder, and then we're going to talk about it.
He was still the father of my kids.
So I asked Shanna the question.
Did you have anything to do with Jared's murder?
No, I did not have anything to do with his murder.
Shanna.
All right, so there's not a whole lot to go on, but there's a couple of things that are worth pointing out. All right, watch this right here.
Murder.
No.
As I stated earlier, we oftentimes close our eyes when we have mental images that we don't like. So when she's asked this question, she's closing her eyes for a more extended period of time than she has in other parts that we've watched. We have not gotten a whole lot of footage of her. So this is limited in terms of what we can glean from it, other than she doesn't like being asked this question. It could be that it's because there's painful memories associated with losing her ex-husband. That's always possible. There's many possibilities here, but it is a behavior that's worth noting. I'm going to let this play, and then we're going to go back and watch it one last time.
I did not have anything to do with his murder.
Shanna.
Jared's murder.
No, I did not have anything to do with his murder.
Shanna said.
Do you have any idea who might have done this?
I do not have any idea As I said, we've been divorced. We don't run in the same social circles. All I know is that I would never want anybody to go through this.
All right. There was a lot there. We're going to go back to the first part of this and we're going to talk through it.
Who might have done this?
I do not.
So there was the eye close again when asked if she knows who did this. No, I do not. So there's something about this question. She closed her eyes while responding.
I have any idea. As I said, we've been divorced. We don't run in the same social circle.
Now, this is interesting. So she's explaining we don't run in the same social circles. So rather than just answering, no, I don't know who did this, she's now explaining we don't run in the same circles, I guess implying that he got himself involved with something or implying that it's somebody that she doesn't know. But I think in some ways she's saying too much right here. Just saying, no, I don't know who it was would have been a satisfactory answer. Now, some people like to say more. So I'm not saying that this is hugely consequential. Once again, I'm not saying that she's guilty because she's saying this. But it is interesting that she's providing that detail because it seems somewhat unnecessary. Let's go back and watch this one last time, and then we'll continue on.
Who might have done this?
I do not have any idea. As I said, we've been divorced. We don't run in the same social circles. All I know is that I would never want anybody to go through this.
So as you can see right there, she starts blinking a lot more right here.
All I know is that I would never want anybody to go through this.
So as she's talking about it, as she's talking about that we don't run in the same social circles for whatever reason, that made her blink more. And she's saying, I wouldn't want anybody to go through this.
Again, she'd say one thing.
Honestly, that I wish it weren't like this. I wish things could have been and could be different.
Now, there's one small thing that I really caught here that is interesting. Once again, I know I've said this many times, but I do want you to hear this. The goal of this truly is not to prove innocence or guilt or to raise suspicion. The goal is so you can understand what some of the body language we're observing oftentimes means. It doesn't have to mean that it's universally true. It doesn't have to mean it applies to her. But there's one interesting thing about this that I want to point out.
She'd say one thing.
Honestly, that I wish it weren't like this.
So the interesting thing is that she ends up looking at the camera. Now, this is not necessarily hugely consequential, but it does show that she has an awareness of the camera when she's talking about this, that for whatever reason, in other parts, she's been connected with the interviewer. As she's delivering this message, she is thinking about the audience. Or maybe it's possible that she was just looking to the side and just happened to glance at the camera. But it is interesting because sometimes when people are looking at cameras or when they're thinking about the fact that what they're saying is going to be broadcast, it makes them look towards the camera because they're then thinking about their audience. So that may not be consequential here, but I thought it was interesting to point out that she did, in fact, for the first time that I've noticed anyway, look directly at the camera while she was talking about the final message here.
I wish things could have been and could be different.
So that pretty much wraps up the interview. She's currently in the process of getting extradited to another state to stand trial. Hopefully this has been an interesting video for you. The goal is just to point out different types of body language that we're observing from her during this interview. The goal is not to prove her innocence nor her guilt. There's multiple possible explanations of the various types of body language that we saw. I'll certainly be keeping an eye out as this continues to develop. Hopefully we'll have an opportunity to do additional body language analyses as all of this moves forward. And before we wrap things up, I do want to remind you to please comment and let me know if there are other current cases going on. I try to keep up with as many as I can, but sometimes I can't get to all of them, but I do read all of the comments and I do try to keep up with what people are most interested in. I also wanted to remind you before we finish up to like and subscribe if you want to see more content just like this. All right, thanks for watching.